Hey guys, I'm Drago and welcome back to making even more sprites for Pokemon Infinite Fusion. That's right, we're back for part 3 of this series. I am absolutely addicted to doing this, it is so much fun. Once again, I went on the Fusion Dex website and I pressed random and I made sprites of whatever fusions we got. And let me tell you, this episode has the craziest fusions we've had so far. Keeping this intro short and sweet, I hope you all enjoy. Oh, and also maybe like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. Okay, thanks. We're back guys on the Fusion Dex website. And once again, we are clicking random and seeing what we get. Here we go. Venonat. Okay, could be worse, could be way worse, could be way worse. I can see it sort of working. Also that other variant is really cute. I was looking at this fusion thinking, how the hell am I going to do this? But little did I know this would actually be the easiest one of the whole video. So I started off with a Magikarp base from Sinovausilus. I think that's how you say it. I'm sorry if I said it wrong. But yeah, I had the idea of having Venonat sort of nose at the top and the fangs coming down, and then basically just remove the lips of Magikarp, and there you go, there's the mouth. I actually had to Google, does Venonat have an open mouth? I always used to think, right, that bit, that's the nose, that bit was his mouth. That bit was the mouth of Venonat. That was he just always had it open. So it took me a while to figure out by looking at other sprites and stuff that he actually has a mouth that he can open, and that's just the nose. But yeah, I kept to the general body shape of Magikarp and I just added some Venonat features in there. So the eye was way bigger. I added its little hands as a couple of the fins, and I also turned the carp whisker into the antenna of Venonat. This one actually turned out to be really fun to do. I quite like doing fur and pixel art and something fluffy and fuzzy, because it means you can be quite loose with your lines and it can be messy and it works. They also added extra lines of fur to sort of follow these lines that Magikarp has on its body normally. So it gives more of a sense of it being Magikarp rather than just a fish-shaped Venonat, if that makes sense. Because the point of these fusions is that the first Pokemon determines the head and the colour palette, and the second Pokemon determines the body. So in really simple terms, you basically put the head of one Pokemon onto the body of another, and then you make it the colour of the Pokemon that's the head. So when it's two Pokemon that are kind of similar in shape, so Venonat is round, Magikarp is kind of round, I do like to make sure that I've got elements both in there to make it clear what they are. So that included these lines that Magikarp has on its body. Initially, I wasn't going to have the top and bottom fin in it, but I decided to keep those as well to further exaggerate the fact that it's Magikarp. But like I said, I made the two, what are they called? Pectoral fins? I think they're the pectoral fins. I made those into Venonat's little hands, and it kind of worked well because the way its hands are done in the sprite is it almost looks like the fins of a fish anyway, so it worked. I went with my usual process of colouring and shading these, which is adding in the flat colour and colouring the line art accordingly, and then I go into taking the colours using my eyedropper tool to make sure everything is accurate and just shaded it. Again, this one was so much fun to shade. There's just something about being able to be really loose with the fur and being able to really make use of each pixel to make that detail, because every pixel is almost like a clump or strand of fur, so you can really get some detail going on here when you're using fur or fuzz or fluff or whatever with pixel art. It could be really fun actually to do this. I always thought it'd be really difficult, but it was really fun. So that's Venonat done. Let's go on to the next one. Let's see what we get. Tentabok. Okay, so is that Tentacool? Yeah, Tentacool and Arbok. Okay. Another one that could work, I guess, I think. I don't know. I wasn't lying when I said there were some wacky fusions in this video. I had no idea how to even approach this one. So I ended up just going for the basic, putting the head on the body and just seeing how it went. I used 2 bases here to help me. The Arbok base is by Male MC and the Tentacool base is by Tiohez. What I was hoping to do was just put a bit of Tentacle's head on the body and from there just sort of figure it out, just sort of build it all out. It wasn't until later that I'd sort of started figuring everything out that the idea kind of started to take shape. But you can see I did a lot of fiddling with this one. I mean, at first Tentacle's head was going to be flat like a snake head. I eventually did put the more bulbous Squidward head on there with the actual red parts and stuff on there too. When I was doing the false face, I really wished that this was Tentacool. Because let me tell you, I had an idea for this being Tentacool, but this was Tentacool, so I couldn't do what the idea I had. Because I wanted to put like a false nose there, like Tentacool's long nose that he has. But I couldn't really do that because it wasn't Tentacool, it was Tentacool, so I didn't want it to get confused. I had to improvise a lot. I used the sort of red bulb parts to make the eyes, and later on I did add a mouth, but it took me a moment to figure out how I wanted to add a mouth. I wasn't going to at first, but I thought it looked a bit too plain without it. For the end of the tail, I had this idea where the 2 tentacles of Tentacool, the tentacles, that sound like that. It just sounds like I said the same word twice in a row then. But his 2 tentacles, I thought about putting them on the end of the tail. At first, I tried to go for several of them, but then I thought, again, that's a bit too Tentacool-y. Tentacool has multiple tentacles, but Tentacool itself only has the pair of them. So I thought, okay, just make 2, and I was going to just have them splitting off, but then I thought, what if I sort of twisted them together and it would almost look like the rattle of a snake? Because this is Arbok, it's a snake. I know Ekans is the one with the rattle and not Arbok, but still, it kind of fit that snake theme. Honestly, it started to kind of remind me of Spheel's tail, but in the colouring, it sorted itself out. Then after finally figuring out the sort of mouth I wanted on it, I still thought it just looked like Tentacle's head slapped on Arbok's body, which it is, and unfortunately some fusions do end up like that because they're just so radical and out there isn't anything else you can do with it. Like, some Pokemon are just so fundamentally different from each other that it is like impossible to do anything other than the head straight on the body method. But I ended up with the idea of using the 2 tentacles that come out of underneath the head to sort of wrap around the hood of the Cobra and almost make it look like, I don't know, I don't really know what I was going for. It just added a bit more pizzazz to it. It nicely ridged the hood and it just added a bit extra that helped it from not looking so flat and boring. Sometimes you just gotta mess around and add things and see what works. That's why when I'm adding something, I always like to use a separate layer so that if it doesn't work, I can just get rid of it without affecting my initial sketch. Colouring was much of the same, but this time actually kind of more sort of thought towards it. There were sort of a lot of ridges and shapes here that I needed to make sure they were visible. Didn't want this just looking flat, especially around the hood area, so the false face. I needed to make sure the eyes looked like they were definitely sort of bulbous, and I need to make sure that the sort of ridges and folds of every single bit of the face, every single line, every single segment was there. You could tell that this wasn't just a flat surface with a pattern on it, that there was actually folds and divots in the skin, because that's more what I was going for. And it's looking quite creepy actually, I quite like it. Probably the only part of the fusion I like, the rest of it's kind of crap. I also utilised a bit of dithering on the tentacles, just gives it a bit more texture. Alright, our last one for this video, let's see what we get. Houndswine. Oh, that's going to be a difficult one. Okay, yeah, I guess we can give it a go, but that's going to be difficult. So this fusion was the one that I had the clearest idea in my head for, but it was one of the harder ones with execution. While the Piloswine sprite is directly from Game Freak, the Houndour base is from Leandres. Now, I know there's going to be a flame war in the comments about how you pronounce Houndour. I have always called it Houndour. I've heard people call it Houndour. I've heard people call it Houndour, Houndora, like loads of different pronunciations for it. I've always said Houndour. I instinctively say Houndour, so that's probably what I'm going to be saying throughout this video. Do feel free to correct me in the comments. Yeah, I have no idea how it's actually said, because obviously if you scale pixel art without it being in the same aspect ratio, then you no longer keep the sharp edges and it just looks like an absolute mess. Now, my base idea was to have Houndour's head and have the sort of flaps of fur from Piloswine covering his eyes, just like the actual Piloswine does. And that was pretty much it. That was my idea. But that's the thing with doing these sprites, is that your ideas kind of change over time as you're doing it, and the sprite just generally evolves as you're going. Ha, get it? Evolve. So once I had the base of the idea in, I just started to add to it as I felt fit. So one thing I ended up doing was adding Houndour's little paws. So it's like the little Piloswine has these paws that it's sat on as it's laid down. On the ear, I ended up adding a couple of little earrings, because at first I wasn't going to add these sort of bony ridges on the top. So I used the earrings to sort of represent those. But as you'll see later, I did end up adding the bony ridges anyway. Using the tucks of Piloswine, I turned those into the big fans of Houndour. So it was like it had two big fans sticking out. And of course, I had to put the skull on it somewhere. The skull pattern is a big part of Houndour, and it was definitely needed. Took me a moment to get the shape of it right, but I got there eventually. So Piloswine is a funky mon in that it has a very limited colour palette, but it has a lot of shades to that colour palette, which helps give it the depth that it needs to separate parts from each other. Now Houndour, while it has more separate colour, it doesn't have as many shades. So I did have to make some of my own shades, a sort of middle grey between the base colour and the dark grey, as well as some extra tones of the sort of purpley white that there was, just to help with the tucks and the other sort of metal / bone parts. Now initially I was going to have it so the entirety of the bottom of the Piloswine body was the tan of Houndour, so like Houndour has the tan belly, but it looked quite weird. I don't know why, it just didn't look right. It made it look like it was almost shaved on that bit, and it was really weird. So I decided instead to play into exaggerating the edges of each tuft of fur. So using a tan colour, I basically just added this pattern into the fur where the edge of each tuft has this highlight of the tan colour. Not only did it help add more sort of uniqueness to the sprite, it was a bit more interesting to look at, it also helped separate parts from each other. So this made it clear that this is the tufts of fur that cover the eyes and not just any other part of fur, you know, it's not blended into the fur below it, it is hanging over it. It just helps separate those parts out. Shading up this sprite was actually quite random in a way. There was of course thought and method to it in places. Mostly the bottom of the body was the thought out part, but when it got to doing sort of the texturing of the fur, I was sort of a lot looser with my pen and a lot more random with my movements. Just like I said with the Venonat and Magikarp fusion, each pixel is like a strand or clump of fur, and so to have these random gaps and broken lines and stuff within the shading helps to exaggerate the fact that there is this fur texture there. It's like how if you were doing normal detailed art that isn't pixel art, you'd probably have a brush for hair or fur or whatever that is like a bunch of small faded lines together that makes the lines of each strand of fur. But obviously here we're only working with pixels, so each pixel is representing the strands of fur. Also meant I had to be quite loose with the line art colours as well. Line art colouring and shading is a big part of the Infinite Fusion style, so I made sure that it still made the lines clear and the segments clear while not looking like it was just a black outline, and while still keeping the idea of these bits of fluff and fur and stuff. And I keep saying that. Yeah, I already recorded this voiceover once and I forgot to press record, so I'm a little bit out of steam now. And there we have it. Venonat and Magikarp, Tentacool and Arbok, and Houndour and Piloswine. Let me know down below which of these three is your favourite one. I am torn between the Venonat and Magikarp and Houndour Piloswine. I think I'm leaning towards Venonat and Magikarp. He's just a fuzzy little fish. He's a funny dude and I love him. Can I have a plushie of this, please? I wish to squeeze it. But yeah, let me know down below which one is your favourite. And maybe even comment any fusions you'd like to see. Maybe I could do a video where I tick your requests rather than pressing random on the website. Of course, not every Pokemon is within the game Infinite Fusion. So if you're unsure what is in there, then just head on over to the Fusion Index website. The link will be in the description below. And you can check which Pokemon are there and request a fusion based on those. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry it's a bit of a shorter one, but I just could not resist making another one of these. They are so fun to do. Leave a like, maybe consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it if you did. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye!